Hey guys, this is episode I don't remember of the podcast. I don't count these things. Today we have on Rory Anderson, who I think is a really interesting guy, especially because he's different from the most poker players that I meet. I guess because he doesn't really play poker. He's more recreational, I would guess, or semi-pro at times. Um, I guess he's your consultant, is that right?
Yeah, I'm a consultant.
Right. So, welcome on the show, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Right. So, I actually want to dig into some poker stuff because your stuff on using psychology at the tables, I think, is just really fascinating and funny and I think pretty effective. So, can you talk about some of the methods you actually use when playing?
Um, yeah. I haven't. So first off, I haven't played since I don't think since the main event with you. So it's been a little while since I've played. But I was actually just thinking about hopping in a tournament this week since I had some time off. But yeah, some of the methods I use are not really by choice, but by necessity. If I want to be competitive a lot of the time, just a lot because my strategy game isn't as tight and as also as broad knowledge as a lot of the people I compete against, and I like to do well. So I try to compete in places where people may not necessarily devote a lot of their time and energy to developing. And so uh, you may have heard many times that people, it's not a real great idea to be talking at the table to people because you give away a lot of information. So I lay a lot of groundwork in my game and trying to get people to talk, and it starts off as really innocent.
I have to tangent. I have to interrupt because
Yeah, go ahead.
have you watched the ESPN coverage like William Kassouf in
Yeah,
general?
yeah. I watched, I think, every episode. Yeah.
All right. Should I get your explanation of your tactics first and then ask you about them, or
Yeah, because I would say that he and I are, I guess, in the same area, but and I understood a lot of kind of what he was doing, but I think I have some pretty strong opinions on, first of all, his abilities and skill and and so on. So I probably have a lot to say about him. But yeah, I go a little bit farther with what I do because a lot of times, like with William Kassouf, and we can get into that, is they end up trying to sound really sophisticated, and they do that by not saying a lot and leaving a lot for up to someone's imagination to be like, ooh, what could they be doing? Like, what kind of masterful things are they putting together? That's not really my strategy. Um, just because playing the speech play game and the psychological game is really hard to maintain control of, and if you don't do it properly, you end up really just hurting yourself in the long run most of the time. Good players will just tear you apart. So I keep my speech game and the psychological game as simple as possible, because when you start laying down like a web of non-truths or setting up traps and stuff, you have to remember everything. You have to there's a lot to remember, and to be honest, like, I don't know, I'm pretty smart, but I don't have photographic memory, and I can't remember what everyone is doing all the time, who's listening to what, and it's very easy just to get lost and then just be a big buffoon.
right?
So I keep my psychological play pretty, actually very simple. And I a lot of what I do is try to learn the other people at the table, and then that will dictate a lot of kind of what I try to implement in my gameplay. Who I you know do some really simple level one stuff on, and I think we've discussed this before, where the simple act of Hollywooding one way or the other. So let me lay down a great example, a really great example of that. It's like it's the most the golden example for me, really, and it works and it's so effective as you mentioned, and that would be when you find yourself in a spot where you think you can pull off a pretty good bluff. There's really no harm in doing this tactic, and you could experiment maybe in a lower buy-in tournament or just in a safe area, in a safe spot. But when you want to bluff, and someone's a mediocre player, and they're gonna take into consideration a little bit about how you're acting. One of the most effective moves I've ever known, it's probably made me the most chips in tournament zone, is letting off like the huge side, this huge Hollywood, like the turn or the river comes down, and your body language slumps, maybe you get a little angry, you totally act all disgruntled. You wait like 10 seconds and kind of mutter to yourself like, yeah, you probably got there, like all kinds of stupid stuff, and then make a huge overbet, right? And what happens here, like, the person's watching you, the river comes down, and you start acting all stupid, like completely overacting, like you've missed or you're worried that they've gotten there. And then right after, you instantly make a large bet. And if you've maintained, your image at the table, and like people think you're stupid to begin with, which is often the image that I get, that I give people, they're like, oh my God, there's more. And then they love, and intermediate to above intermediate players love to then lecture how stupid, a great Hollywood pal, and then they end up folding. It's so clear if you have an image of a novice player or even a simple guy that you're overacting there, that you're trying to give off the image that you're weak, but you really are weak, which is the kicker, and it's the most effective play like I ever learned in live poker.
When do you remember when you first got this idea?
I think I used to get upset when people would act weak and have really good hands, and let's say, I would call off because maybe I was playing like a madman, and I used to like pay off people like that, but I always knew that they were strong, and I started like thinking like, well, no one else pays that guy off. No good player in the right mind would make that call. And I started thinking like, oh, maybe I can use that as a weapon in my arsenal.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know how many years ago that was. That was easily like 8 to 10 years ago.
I imagine you could do that for any type of obvious tell that there is. Like
and that's the fun part, is it started off as simple as like Hollywooding, and everyone who plays a lot of poker has seen someone do this at one point or another, and maybe they don't over Hollywood it the way I do sometimes. You have to decide like how far you need to go, how ridiculous you need to get in your salesman in the show that you put on. But after I started playing around with that, I started thinking exactly what you're talking about. Like, ooh, what other things can I kind of oversell in weird spots where, people just, it's clear that you've made a mistake in you make it appear that you've made a mistake so that they know what you have. It's like a level 1 sell or whatever, but it's really a level 2 play where, you want them to think that you screwed up, but you haven't.
Right. There was another great one. Like, I think it was a tactic used to tilt people.
That is almost foolproof. Like, if someone likes to talk poker, this pretty much always works. And you can like combo it. You can totally combo it with other things, like when you happen to run really well or whatever and not play smart. So this all originated back maybe in like 2000, 2001 when I first started playing party poker.
Okay.
And I would play heads up limit games, and I learned very quickly that if I could tilt people, they would become more aggressive towards me and they'd play worse. And so sometimes this required a like short-term dump in order to get someone where you wanted them. And what I would do here is purposely play like clearly wrong strategically. I'd make a bad move. Like, for instance, a great example, you know, call down with a gut shot or whatever, or even re-raising with gut shots and then smashing it. And then people always want to tell you what you do wrong in poker. And that's the great part about this play is people always love to show off their knowledge of the game.
Especially heads up. There's a lot
Yeah,
of back and
especially
forth.
heads up. There's a lot of banter. And it works in the larger games too. There's always someone who wants to chirp, especially if you got the better end of them, on a bad play. And what goes on here is someone's going to start telling you how bad your play was or whatever. And this is, like I said, very, very effective again, where you can start lecturing a intermediate player bad. This works for all levels, but it really works good against high level players who like to talk. And it's you want to lecture them about why your play was statistically right and they don't know what they're talking about. And I've clearly made a bad play or whatever, and maybe I've done it on purpose to get, to set them up for this. And then they're going to tell me how what a donk I am or whatever. And then I'll start arguing with them about how, no, it was actually the right strategic play. And this is clearly not the case. I'm absolutely wrong. But if you...
I imagine being condescending helps as well.
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, you want to playfully flirt between it's all funny to you, but you're totally serious that you're right, and it drives people bonkers. And then for the rest of the night, if it heads up, it's gonna get them going. Even if it's at a 5 to 8 handed table or something like that, those people are gonna be after you for the rest of the night. I like it in tournaments just as well.
Right. But I also see you use not trying to piss people off, but use the opposite of that, like trying to be friendly with people to gain information.
Yeah. I mean, I never ever want to come off as a dick or being malicious, because I'm actually not malicious. I'm there to win the game and also be as nice as possible. So I'm never going to really use what I would call negative tactics unless I really don't like someone.
Right.
And as simple as someone who lectures a bad player, I don't like instantly.
Right.
So I immediately have no mercy for those people. But for most people, I love getting, this happened at the main event this year. I got to learn a lot about most of my tables, and it really, really did help me figure out, for me personally, where I was going to make my moves and where my call downs were going to be. So, and I guess that's what Kasuf, what I see that he has that really does help me. And I think it's effective for him as well. And that's just keeping the chatter going. And with every bit and every sentence someone says, typically helps me build a profile or, in my head of who a person is and how they might act in different situations.
He sort of won an EPT high roller a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine who I used to coach got second, but he ended up getting more money than Kasuf, quite a bit more. And Kasuf just took the chop, gave my buddy Patrick an extra $10K so he could get first place and the trophy just for sponsorships and stuff.
Well, yeah, Kasuf's definitely playing a brand game right now, right? You can tell if you follow him at all. He's not necessarily... I mean, he definitely likes winning in poker, but he's winning... He sees himself as a business, and he is a business. He's a brand. And so he's spending a lot of time catering to social media, and he started up a website instantly. So he saw a lot of value in commercializing himself, and I think it's probably a pretty smart move.
Yeah, that sounds really smart, but something I just would never do. Too lazy for that. I'm not nearly as interesting as Kasuf. Would not get the ratings.
Well, it's mostly, I mean, the accent is like half his value, I think.
Right.
If it was me in his spot and I was as condescending and tried some of the sneaky moves that he did on there with no accent, I swear to God, I would be villainized like 10x to what to what he was, and probably rightly so. Like he deserved a lot of the criticism that he got.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think what's interesting is that you are willing, so to do that, to do the thing where you're purposely sounding stupid, like you're making a tarot play and purposely
Yeah.
sounding stupid,
Yeah.
it's just not a thing many poker players would be comfortable doing. Especially if they play for a living, like their ego is kind of tied into I when I talk poker, I'm smart. Like you don't want a poker player doesn't want to sound stupid at the table.
And that's totally where some of those, like we were talking about, some of those angles start coming at from my side. Is that's a piece of information that you can leverage against people. The fact that ego is really tied to poker. People really do want to sound. There's not a lot to do at the table. Like, you want to sound. You want people love being notable and respected and stuff like that. So you're right. It is really counterintuitive to purposely sound like an idiot.
I don't think you could do the things you do without the elimination of ego, because you wouldn't have said, "Oh, I'm not going to beat these guys in terms of like strategy and tactics." So
Yeah.
let me find the other way if your
Yeah.
ego like wasn't involved, you know.
Yeah. The really fun part is not a lot of people explore that part of the game, right? Like people are really, really honed in on perfecting their play, eliminating mistakes. And I'm not saying I ignore all that. I trust me, as you know from talking to me, like I really like to learn how to eliminate mistakes, and I make plenty of them. It's just the fact that I have let's say 100% of energy to give. Yeah, I'm going to be most effective. Well, I'd probably be pretty effective concentrating anywhere at this point, but um, it's really fun to play in a space that not a lot of other people have ventured into, or at least not that I've talked to, and I haven't really witnessed a lot of it, because you should be able to pick off someone doing some of these things.
So is that something you've intentionally tried to cultivate? Just this, I mean, I don't want to use the word egolessness. I don't even know if that's a word, but lack of lack of ego and just looking at things objectively. Is that something you've intentionally cultivated, or kind of just happened naturally, or what?
Um, I don't know. I'd say going back to once it took a long time for me to realize how much effort and homework people do into cultivating their strategic and mathematical game. And once I truly respected that, it was not an option to beat people there, especially since I have a full-time job doing other stuff. At this point, I only play, like I don't know, 4 to 8 tournaments a year, and I don't really play cash anymore. So I don't study the game anymore. I'm not going to do well where people practice every single day. I can't just come into their house and try to think that I'm going to outsmart them, because I'm not. But if no one spends a lot of time, fooling around with, some of these other strategies, I still don't think I'm going to be, a great player. But I'll tell you what, it gives me a really good chance to, have a few tournaments for my highlight reel and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. Another aspect of it, I think, is this social openness. And it was really interesting because interacting with most poker players, they're generally more introverted, in my experience. And you were just like complete opposite. I think everywhere I went with you, you like made a friend or something like that. Or
Yeah.
had like some kind of engaging conversation past like the typical yeah, hey, how's it going? How's your
Yeah.
day? And
I don't know. I think a lot of yeah. I guess I'm pretty like extroverted. I'm like to meet a lot of new people and strangers and stuff like that. And a lot of the poker players are pretty quiet, but I think a lot of people like have a lot to say. You just need to get them going. And a lot of people get annoyed by that at poker tables because they want to concentrate on the game. They don't like too much chatter going on. You see it
even
from
even
yeah,
away
but
from the poker tables, I think a lot of people have trouble going first, like being the first
yeah,
person to like interact.
yeah,
And
totally.
was this just a natural tendency you've had, or is this something you've cultivated, or what?
Huh. Um, I don't know. I guess what's really funny, especially when I started off in business, when I started getting internships and stuff, a lot of like feedback that I got was that I didn't talk enough, and I'm still very quiet in the business world a lot, especially in business meetings and stuff like that. Um, I guess I feel very comfortable outside of business meetings, and like you said, just meeting people on the street, maybe at a bar, at a restaurant, at the poker table. I feel I don't know, just very comfortable just shooting the shit, and quickly feeling out people. How can I open this person up? Like, no one likes very actually a decent percentage, I guess, loved hearing poker stories, but most of us hate hearing poker stories. And then just like people hate poker stories, some people, hate, my jokes or whatever. Or some people, you gotta like figure out, do people want to talk about, what I do for a living? Do people want to talk about what I grew up doing, what my family does? Do people want to talk about themselves? There's a lot of different ways to try to crack someone's um, verbal diarrhea safe. um,
So
and
is your mindset is more of how do I get this? How do I make this person? What is this person interested in? How do I have
yeah,
an interesting conversation with him rather than, oh, is this person going to be interesting or not? Should I even bother talking to them?
yeah. Well, I think most people 100% have interesting things to say. The question is like some people, there are people who are like Pandora's box that I wish I never get going at a table because it can even tilt me. So sure, it works in reverse sometimes. But I don't like try to analyze people too hard. I don't try to do it unnaturally. It's fun for me. Like aside from playing a strategic game, I just enjoy shooting the shit, and so it's just part of like if you go take a communication class or whatever on body language, there's something that like comes naturally where I look for reads of whether someone is irritated by me, is enjoying, engaging what I'm saying, or if they can just sit there and they really want to put in their headphones, but they like have like one headphone on and one headphone off to barely show me that they're listening to me.
Right. I think out of all the people I've met, you're you have to be top three and just like engaging with people and just having like a good time. So what advice would you give to people who are more introverted like myself? And yeah, I'll just end it right there. What advice or what would you recommend that they do?
I think much like everything else, practice, push yourself in uncomfortable positions. Like I don't know, and set a quota for yourself to like on a daily basis, or whenever you get out into public, like whether you're paying for your gas at a gas station, try to engage someone, and then also try to engage people without run of the mill crap. That so there are things that icebreakers that can facilitate an open line of communication. Then there are icebreakers, and those ones often like end conversations very quickly though. So if you ask really boring questions or boring stuff about yourself, if you do run-of-the-mill conversational icebreakers, they often like make a conversation end after a couple of sentences. And so maybe try something, your opening line, something other than a conversational piece that you would learn if you were from France and trying to learn English. Like, how are you doing? My name is, I do this for work. What do with weather, blah, blah, blah. Like, try to get some interesting stuff in really early. And a lot of times you can do that by noticing something about someone or putting a feeler out. Like maybe, at a poker table, if you're not sure who you want to talk to first, maybe you say something loud enough to one person that you're not sure is going to be receptive about it, and then someone else will chime in, and it's just about putting feelers out there where people get passionate about certain things. I remember probably the funniest conversation I ever had. It had the whole table like in tears laughing. I won't mention his name, but he's a Foxwoods reg, and I didn't know him at the time. And I started talking about video games, right? Because I played a lot of video games growing up, like really nerdy type stuff, first-person shooters, massive online multiplayer games, and so on. Things like League of Legends. And so I started talking about Twitch, back when Twitch was relatively new and becoming known by some people. And the guy at the table, after I had explained it to a couple of the older guys, the guy chimed in and said that he had watched a flight simulator the other day on Twitch. And everyone started laughing. And he goes, the real kicker was, I watched it for 45 minutes, and the guy hadn't even taken off yet. Like, and it was like, it became the most nerdy conversation of all time. And everyone was dying. Who would watch a guy doing a flight simulator for 45 minutes, and the guy didn't even take off? Anyways, I instantly like that guy a lot. And now whenever I see him, I chat him up. He also happens to be, seems to be a pretty successful player. Makes a lot of cashes. But yeah, I don't know. Isn't it easiest to talk about things that you really enjoy? The problem is, not everyone always enjoys what you enjoy. So
I think a common argument is just it's really hard to get a conversation away from small talk. And most poker players hate that. Like, oh, how's the weather? Or did you see the game? Or
the worst, talking about poker.
It's funny that poker players hate talking about poker. I don't know if that's... Do people at your job just hate discussing job stuff?
No, that's definitely workplace to workplace. People at my job, we do strength finder test at my job. It's very interesting. Like, half the people at my job are learners, and they're very curious, and they truly do love what they do, and they're problem solvers.
What's a strength finder test?
I don't have the book in front of me. You can look it up. Actually, I can as well. I'll do it later. But I think they test like 60 different attributes to your personality, and for the basic one, I think it's like 100. I don't know, near $100 or something. They tell you what your top 5 strengths are. Yeah, and it's pretty interesting. Let me tell you like a little bit about yourself that you didn't know. It's called the Clifton Strength Finder test.
All right, I'm gonna write that down in our chat.
Yeah.
So I'm just typing Strength Finder test.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people have the wrong mindset. I think this is a mindset I typically have of just, I don't want to start a conversation because I'm worried it's going to be boring, or I'm worried about small talk, or just too involved in like my own thing to go out and do anything.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, because the truth is, like, yeah, you can get caught in some awkward silences. You can tell jokes that aren't funny. You can look stupid. You kind of got to put yourself out there, because the only way to get better is to practice it, right? And that's why I said do it in situations where you feel less vulnerable. Like I said, when you're paying for your gas, or maybe you talk to a waiter, all these different places where you probably never see this person again. You have really nothing at risk. That's a good place to kind of try it out, and like see if you can take it twice as long as you think you should or something, and fail on purpose. Because the only way to like not do it next time is to have failed once and then like, oh, that's how far I can go before someone loses interest or something gets really, really awkward.
Right. Yeah, I think people look at it emotionally, whereas like if it's a game, if you want to get good at poker, you kind of have to play, and especially if you play tournaments, you just lose a lot. And, that's kind of how you get better, especially playing better players, whatever.
For sure.
So you kind of have to have that mindset with conversations, but I don't think people do. Especially like a lot of poker players. A question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with that. It's just, it's not part of the culture, right? What Kasuf did this year was highly talked. It was a big conversational piece. And even some of the some of the better players in the world were giving him props for what he was doing, because he's taking it to a whole nother level that other people don't. It's just kind of a culture shock where most of the time people like him are just out of line or whatever, and on borderline harassing people and not likable to be around. The key is to make yourself likable. In the poker world, if we all started turning into Kasufs or whatever, rules would be made instantly to shut it down, because no one would want to play poker anymore. Even for me, like a lot of times, I sit down at a table. I don't like being forced into conversations, but I can totally be coerced into it sometimes, like against my own will. And when that happens, someone's probably getting some information out of me if they really wanted it.
Right. I haven't watched much of the Kasuf coverage. I don't watch too much poker on TV anymore.
Yeah.
It's lost its allure, I guess. So a question I have is that, so I think in Vegas you must have had like 10 just random conversations with people, and I assume none of them led to like any like friendships or anything like that, or anything past that.
A couple like LinkedIn connections and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, no, I don't think I've. Well, no, I'll tell you. I met a few of the guys I'm still friends with on Facebook, and there's still some like semi communication from there.
Oh, okay. Even if it doesn't lead to any of that, do you still just find that valuable or worthwhile?
Yeah, it's like, again, I don't. To me, it's partly effective and partly I just enjoy chatting with people, and I don't like. I personally don't like forcing things. There are days when I don't feel very chatty, and I'll be the silent one at the table, kind of dealing with listening to music and playing poker or whatever, or at a bar, and I don't feel like talking to anyone. But most days I do feel it, so it's a lot easier when you naturally just want to get into it, and so I just naturally enjoy starting up these conversations. I think they're also valuable because I don't know. I think there's always room to get better at it, and dropping icebreakers and stuff can help you be a better conversationalist in the future. And there's plenty of times in your life and opportunities where you're put in situations where you can, be quiet and listen to other people speak, or you can put yourself at the center of attention, which is always a dangerous game, but it's definitely a lot less nerve-wracking after you've put yourself out there, a few hundred times.
Right. So yeah, I think it's the odds of turning like some random encounter into a friendship is pretty low, but like the risk versus reward is basically worth it because you're basically risking nothing and it's regardless. I mean, I've seen you just kind of interact with people, and me just, I'd kind of just stand around there and not say anything, and I'd just like be kind of cracking up, and everyone would just be laughing. It'd just be a good time. Just everyone would be off on their way.
I'll tell you one thing that's really, really pushed me to do it, and there's a lot of reward out there. And like you said, there was really no risk, is especially in the last like 5 years or so, I've been doing vacations, solo vacations,
which I find just incredibly weird.
It is, but I actually, it was a lot less weird than I thought it was going to be. And not a vacation has gone by where I don't end up hanging out with people for like the entire trip. So, classic example, I'll just use the last trip I went on, which was a month ago. I was down in Puerto Rico, and within 5 minutes, actually, before I even got into my apartment, I saw the guys who were staying below, in the apartment below me, and instantly made friends with them and ended up spending like 80% of my trip with them. And they were 3 German guys who work for Audi. And so when I go on these like solo vacations, I talk to everyone. Why? Because I don't know, it's really fun to not know what I'm going to do, or who I'm going to hang out with the next day or whatever. And so many times chatting with locals or other tourists, end up like getting brought to new places, new restaurants, hearing about different parts of the world. And so there's been a lot of value in a lot of these like stupid little conversations. Right. If you come with me ever to like PR or whatever, and we sit down at a bar, it's guaranteed that I will talk to like 3 to 4 different people from different groups.
As a contrast, I've lived in Saugus my whole life, and I know no one in the whole town.
I like Saugus too, though.
You've been to Hockey Town, USA? Is that where you were playing? Yeah.
When I was 12, I played there like 4 or 5 times a week.
You should have stopped by. I'm pretty close from there.
At that time, I didn't know there was anyone nice in that town. My sample size was Hockey Town.
What? They play rough down there?
Yeah, they're a rough crew.
Right. Yeah, that's something I definitely need to change. And I see it in so many poker players. It's definitely really interesting.
I think there's a lot of value in the poker game for that, for sure. It's just
right. So, I don't know. This is like where I was going to go.
A lot of times it causes more damage than it does value. So you got to get it right.
Well, I think it's interesting in that not being afraid of conversations, of having especially difficult ones, shuts down, like when it comes to problem solving in life especially and in business, shuts down so many options that you have. Does that make sense? Like if you're trying to like solve a problem in business and you're unwilling to have a difficult conversation with someone, that cuts down a lot of your options to solve the problem.
Yeah, I think that leads me to a really simple statistic that I learned in a communications class that I took, I think my freshman or sophomore year of college, and it was actually really eye opening to me. I never even thought about it, but they dropped some wacko statistic, but I'm pretty sure it's been pretty accurate throughout my life, and I use it all the time now. And it's that they said something like 80 or 90% of disagreements are generated due to miscommunication.
I would not agree with that, but I would say a high percentage would be.
But it's a vague statement, because to what degree is the miscommunication? And I've actually found it to be pretty accurate in most cases. depending on what context you're thinking about it, whether it's a business one, a personal relationship, or an argument with a stranger.
Right.
But yeah, and so one thing, so since I'm a consultant and I'm often working with other people in my company or clients, one of the worst things you can do in the business world, in my opinion, is not ask stupid questions, not, beat the dead horse as far as confirming dates, times, facts, expectations, timelines, all this stuff. The worst thing you can do is not talk and have difficult conversation. And to your point, those things are all relatively easy, and getting into more difficult areas, not having conversations about those important things, like, are almost guaranteed to breed issues down the line.
Yeah, I see that, and I see people do that to me in like relationships, and I see myself do that. Like, there's something that bothers me, and I just don't bring it up, or they don't bring it up, and it just leads to just either of us just not talking, just not even contacting the other person, versus, or like just kind of holding on to that during the conversation.
Yeah, it's one of those things, especially what you're getting at. It's one of the easiest things to say is the right thing to do, and it's like the hardest thing to practice it.
Right.
It's so uncomfortable to have tough conversations about a lot of things. Whether it's an uncomfortable conversation or whether it's not necessarily uncomfortable, but a weird question where you're not sure what you'll look like asking, bringing something up, and that's where you get in your own uncomfortableness.
My solution to that is, if any situation requires having a conversation, I just tell Ashley to do it. It's like,
is that not her weak area?
No, that she's you haven't met her much. That's definitely like her strong point.
Yeah,
she's super strong at that.
Yeah.
So
I get that from my one interaction with her.
Right. So another thing, I mean, they're sort of related, but another thing that I think makes you pretty interesting is that you have a lot more discipline than most poker players I meet. And not to paint you as like this perfect model of discipline.
No one would do that.
You are just a lot more than most people. And I'm curious, how have you cultivated that, or is that just like a natural thing, or?
That's an easy place to start off at, and that was again something that developed out of necessity. So when I was growing up, I was the opposite. I was the poster child for lack of discipline, other than the fact that I was religious about playing a lot of sports or whatever, academically and taking care of chores and responsibilities. Organization was, really, really poor all the way up until college. College still wasn't great. Got a little bit better. And to be honest, like, getting a really demanding job, along with having, my parents, lecture me my entire life about it. It just never really clicked until my early 20s. And it was mostly, like I said, out of necessity. I wasn't going to succeed in my career unless I made drastic changes to my discipline. And I learned that really quickly because I hated getting bad grades growing up, and I hate failing at stuff. I'd rather quit than fail. And so when things start off a little bit bumpy at my first job, I was like, every time I made a mistake, I thought the world was going to end, and I took measures and precautions as like, this can't happen again. What do I need to do? And very, very quickly, my life turned into a very, very checklist-oriented life. And it progressed from there to get not just checklist, but graded and recorded, whether I'm trying to lose weight or
For people listening to this, I think Rory has a spreadsheet to like dictate how he wants to like spend his time. That's like very well broken down.
Yeah, I have a to-do list that is personal life and work mixed, and it's got literally every item that I need to get done. It's got due dates, and place for notes and everything. That way I don't forget stuff, because I used to forget, responsibilities that I used to have, like meetings or due dates for deliverables and stuff like that. So now I have that for everything that happens at work and in life, and there's a lot of them. And then I also, like, if I'm always managing my health, and so I keep track of my weight, and I have, I think, like 14 years of my weight data now. Just to monitor and make sure things are staying where I want them or whatever. And then I started also monitoring, as you well know. If you think of yourself as a business, and you're the CEO, right? Because no one really controls your life like you do. There's arguments to be made that a girlfriend or a parent or whatever has a lot of influence in what you're doing, or but the truth is, like, you're really the CEO of yourself. And so I've started to treat myself like a business to some degree, and the object of my business is not to make money, but is to be happy. And my happiness could be derived from financial gain. It could be from making other people happy. It could be selfish, and just it could be power hungry. I don't know. Everyone's business goal for themselves could be different. But I really treat myself like a business, and I document everything that's important that leads to my happiness, and then kind of set qualitative and quantitative metrics to achieve in all the areas that I consider priorities to my happiness. So it's kind of a mess. That's a lot, but
how do you do that with like relationships, particularly with the girlfriend?
Yeah, I don't know. This all derived from, again, I started thinking about like what changed my life in the business world, and I was like, well, heck, I could probably, like, the most important job to me is again running myself, my own business as a human being. And I was like, well, if I'm not tracking, if you think of something as simple in the business world as a end of the year review on how you did at work. Good companies make sure they have a lot of content to look at and review. And as a person, you ask about relationships. How do you expect to ever get better, or to optimize your performance as a person in a relationship, if you don't start to document some of the what's going well and what's not going well in your relationship? If you rely on your memory, you're going to have a really biased accounting of what the hell happened if you didn't document it. Unless,
and if you're smart enough, it's even worse, because like you'll know that your memory could be biased, so you won't even like trust your good memories either.
Yeah. I don't know that. Yeah, I've never had to think about like, what if I had really, really good memory? I'm not sure if that would work out or not, but I definitely don't have good enough memory. I definitely only remember maybe less than half of stuff that happens.
To be explicit, like, what do you think are the main biases people have in relationships?
Um,
when they're like remembering past events? I would say one of them is that you're more likely to remember the negative ones for most people.
yeah, I would agree with that.
Um,
I think when you think back, or at least a, a lot, like for me, a lot of detail is lost,
right.
and without detail, like that's where a lot of very, very important things are. You could tell a story about a night where something went down and there was a confrontation, and like there are probably a handful of crucial details that if you omit could totally flip the story back and forth on who's at fault for doing what.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, the point is like for relationships.
That's interesting because I've had that happen. I'll be arguing a point with my wife, and I'll just be like talking about why I'm right, and then she'll be like, "Well, yeah, you forgot about you doing this first." I'm like, "Oh, right,
Yeah, that hot potato can be passed back and forth many times in one confrontation. And the big problem is when one or the other stakeholder in the confrontation didn't realize that the first thing set the other person off, and so then something gets passed back, and the other person is like, "Hey, what the heck?" and they think the other person threw the first punch.
right."
And again, that goes all the way back to the miscommunication thing, where it's very rare that your partner in crime knows everything that you're feeling or your interpretation. Each stakeholder has a different set of information.
All right, so I'm really interested. What are you documenting? Are you like, I had a argument with the girlfriend today, and this is how it went down? Like, what are you documenting? Like, what are you doing?
Um, well, I don't know. Like usually when disagreements come about, a lot of things get aired. And when that happens, I instantly know that I'm not going to remember. And most of the time, you're concentrating. When things are being aired, if it's both ways, even for me, like a lot of time, I'm concentrating on what I need to communicate to the other person,
Right.
and
I'm trying to
because
win, yo. I don't know about you.
or you're just trying to communicate, like you want to be heard.
Right.
And while you're doing that, well, it's the other person could be talking, and you're just thinking about like, hey, did they understand what I said, or what am I going to say next? And so I have learned that after meetings in business, after talks in my personal life, make sure you sit down and do a recap. And I already know that I'm going to be biased in life towards myself. So take a minute and drop yourself and think about, hey, what did the other person, what did they say? What were they trying to communicate? And, just throw down a few bullets or whatever to, so you don't lose them, whether you use a notebook. I don't like notebooks because I'm too disorganized to maintain a notebook.
Right.
And I often have to like edit my notes like 4 times before I get them into something that I can carry forward.
And are you doing this in a way where you can see trends or anything like that?
Not with disagreements like that. My trending only, for
Are you collecting data rather? That might be a more accurate.
those, yeah, I'm collecting data. I'm collecting data to review that could potentially help me improve my actions in the future. So there's just too many things to track in the world. This is something I learned, being a business analytics guy, is that there's a million different performance indicators out there, and I run into clients that have this all the time. They could track like 1,000 different data points.
Right.
The problem is you can't manage 1,000 different data points.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they have things called KPIs, key performance indicators. They're key, and what makes a key performance indicator, they have to be actionable. typically don't have more than, I don't know, like 10 or something like that. So they need to be manageable and actionable and measurable. And so that's pretty much where I try to keep things high level on my KPIs in life. But then, I could have something really high level that has a lot of PIs beneath it. The problem is, if I don't have any PIs and my memory's not so good, I could be stuck sometimes with being like, I didn't feel like I did that great this week, but I'm not really sure why.
So I'm not sure I get it. So I'm not sure I understand. So what are your KPIs? Or do they change based on like subject to subject or area of your life or what?
They're like ever changing. So I'm not sure what they should be, but I started from picking out the, I don't know if we're still just talking about relationship, management or whatever.
It could be whatever. I'm finding this really interesting, so just go wherever.
I start off with something that I would call a pinnacle or a pillar to happiness. Okay. So let's just use like my social pillar as an example. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to be social. Mm-hmm. And at this stage in my life, anyways, in your early 30s, you start to see a lot of people abandoning their social lives, and not on purpose. It's not that they want to, just, a lot of things, you get a lot of responsibilities in life, kids, marriages, families, jobs, stuff going on. And, maybe you don't reach out to your friends as often as you used to, or maybe they don't reach out to you. So for me, I started off being like, okay, I want to continue to be social with the group of friends that I have. That was my situation.
And that's something different than a KPI? This is like your pillar or something? You're just identifying this as a key area or something?
Yeah, it was a key area. So then I needed ways to judge whether I was doing well socially or not. So okay. It doesn't really matter what other people are doing, how other people are affecting my social ability. The only thing I control is mine. And so I decided to just start jotting a few things down that I thought may help me continue to be, have a successful social life. So I think I created a few KPIs for myself, which would be like, at one point I started off way too detailed, and I had a list. I had a list going of anytime I called or text message or emailed friends on a completely, like, for social reasoning. I had an audit of basically, all right, date and who I reached out to and how I reached out to them. Mm-hmm. And that was really interesting. I had my family in there and my friends and everything. And it was interesting because if you have a big social circle, let's say like your core social circle could be like 20 people, like 20 people you really care about. I'll tell you what, like, people slip through the cracks, and before you know it, it's been 5 months since you've reached out to your sister or, one of your good friends. And, I can only control me, but maybe they're dealing with the same stuff, and all of a sudden, like, you're just not, like, conversing with an important person in your life or whatever. And it's just so easy, and you'd never notice it really until like 6 months down the road, like, I haven't talked to that person in a while. I wonder why. Right. But like, for this, it was a little bit cumbersome to keep track of. But right. I started to notice that, like, it when you put things down on paper, it makes them real. And you have actual dates, you go, whoa, that only felt like 2 weeks since I've reached out to the person, but it's been 6.
Right.
So that would be an example of where I started experimenting with KPIs for my social life, where I was like, and I made it more less of a KPI because it wasn't too measurable. Actually, what it is a KPI. I went backwards. Instead of being so detailed, now I just have a KPI that it was like um, uh, communicating to my friends is one thing that I rate myself every day on a Monday. And it takes like 2 minutes to go through my list. And so have I reached out to people? Have I hung out with people? Like, so I rate like
What would a bad week look like?
The worst. So the worst is like when I have, and this doesn't happen often, but the worst possible week is that I haven't called or hung out with anyone, and people have, texted or messaged me, and I didn't respond.
Right.
I would give myself a 0 on that week, even if I was working 90 hours and, something was going down, financially or, family or girlfriend or something like that.
But you view that as unacceptable. Basically.
Yeah.
So I would just view that as like, oh, standard week or something.
Well, if no one reached out to me and I didn't reach out to anyone, I wouldn't feel as bad. I think it's unacceptable when someone you consider a friend or family member reaches out to you and you don't respond within 24 hours.
Right.
I don't know, it's like for me, that's a pretty straightforward statement that you have more important things to deal with.
Right. So
and
what's like an ideal week, or maybe you can or an average week, if you think that's a more telling or better metric?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still working on this all the time, but it's and it gets a little bit back to, maybe listing down the people that you want to keep in good contact with. And then even if you don't like keep really detailed records, at least you could look at that list and go down it and just try to think to yourself, like, have I talked to this person? Have I talked to this person recently? And I found this to be really, really effective recently in the last like year or two, where I'll, look at a list of the people I consider people I should be reaching out to on a regular basis. And I go down the lists, and for some reason or another, someone will slip through the cracks for a little while, and I go, Jesus, I don't know why I haven't spoken to that person in a while, and I'll just go out of my way to ask how they're doing, if they want to catch up for a drink, or, if they're long distance, if, just spark up a little bit of a conversation. Because, without keeping track of that stuff, it's happened, and it's not the end of the world. Most of my friends are my good friends. Like, we don't need to talk all the time, but it's just I find it to be a very healthy thing to do, and it makes me feel good about myself to like cultivate my important relationships.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you're measuring quantity in that way, but you're not measuring quality, though.
So not directly. It's I'm not measuring how many times I reached out a lot of the time. It's more of a high level, like, how do you think you did this week as far as reaching out to people? And then I guess like there's probably a lot of things I haven't even put into words for myself how I'm judging. It's more of like how do you feel about this area of this pinnacle of happiness of your life? And so definitely there's a lot of quantitative stuff that goes into that.
Right.
But it all comes down to, are you happy with this?
Right. Do you reflect on times you spent with people and whether they were effective or ineffective? Because that's something I kind of do. Like, especially when it comes to like my wife or my kids, it's like, I just noticed I spent like 3 hours like watching TV with Maddie this week, and it's just like pretty low quality type of stuff. Like, are you factoring that in? Are you trying to like cut out like mediocre time like that? Like, what are you doing?
I think it's really interesting that you brought that up, because so many people do that kind of stuff where they're like, oh, you want to spend some quality time? Let's go see a movie.
Right.
And you could do that by yourself and pretend someone's next to you, and it'd be pretty much the same.
Right.
I don't do anything special about that, but it is on top of my mind. So I don't know, when I think about doing something with someone, if I haven't seen them in a while, I wouldn't ask them to just go see a movie or watch TV. I prefer to go grab a drink and have a conversation, or if it's with family, go grab a dinner or something like that.
Is that something you avoid with the girlfriend too, though?
No, we do a lot of. We have a lot of conversation. We watch plenty of TV together and stuff like that. But I don't know. We like to. She likes it more than I do to do things like take walks and hike and stuff like that.
Right. I find watching TV is kind of just like unavoidable, especially when you've been married so long.
Yeah.
I mean,
it is, but
sometimes it's interesting though. Sometimes it's like enjoyable, just like chilling watching TV.
Yeah, it can be educational too, because there's some fun shows out there that have some educational merit and strategic stuff going on. Like for the first time ever, or at least like maybe the second season I've ever watched, my girlfriend and I watched Survivor this year, and there was a lot going on in that show, as far as that are a lot of like relatable things to life, to poker, everything, like how people are presenting themselves, lying, forming relationships, how they treat each other. And so it can be really educational to break down other people's relationships with someone you're in a relationship with, because you get to find out where you agree on stuff, where you disagree. You can learn a lot about each other that way.
I think that's interesting because I watched the Tony Robbins this Tony Robbins thing on Netflix. He put his show, like a documentary, the shows that he does, right?
Yeah, I think I saw that documentary. I think I was like going by it with my sister last week, and she was like, "No, I'm not watching that."
Yeah, so I watched it with Ashley, and we actually had like really interesting conversation afterwards on it, which was kind of like an argument because she just like hates Tony Robbins now. And I think he's amazing.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting, whereas if we watch something that's just pretty dull or not stimulating in that kind of way, it's just like whatever.
Yeah. But there can be some really trashy reality shows that, like I said, can present a lot of like areas of substance.
She told me she doesn't like stand-up the other day.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, okay, time to prove you wrong. I just put on Jim Jeffries' Bear.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, stand-up is good.
Yeah, you could have phoned a friend. I would have come in. I would have put in a lot of effort to. That's upsetting to me.
Yeah, I changed her mind though. Where do you rate Jim Jeffries? Because I think he's. I mean, I've watched 2 of his specials. I think he's the best at the moment.
He is definitely not the best in my opinion, but he is right up there. So I'm not in disagreement that I think he's phenomenal. It's not easy to be. There are very few comics that are like watchable time and time again. He is the top upper echelon, because he's got great content, great delivery, and he doesn't like. There are so many like subtle things comics can do to lose crowds or listeners or whatever, and that guy's just on his game all the time.
He has really educational bits too. He's kind of like Carlin in that way. Like his stuff on like gun control, and the gun control bit was great. He has like bits on religion that are really good.
I feel like he's getting more and more like that. In some of his earlier content, it was more like shock factor, not even educational, but a little bit offensive at times.
Right.
Yeah, but no, Jim Jeffries. All my friends like who I have a lot of respect for, like really smart guys and like comedy. Everyone likes Jim Jeffries.
Right. So who's the top for you?
Um, top. I would say for me, I have one clean comic and then one regular comic, and probably Bill Burr as the non-clean comic. I think that guy is amazing. And then on the clean side, Brian Regan.
Right. What Bill Burr special? I probably already asked you this, but what Bill Burr special should I listen to?
I would say you should listen to them all.
Right.
But if I had to pick one, I would probably say start with "You People Are All the Same."
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see if I get that for free on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah.
I'll check him out. What do you think
Pro-
of Louis C.K.? Because I find rewatching some of his stuff like it's not as like hilarious as I initially thought.
Yeah, I don't know. I really really like him as well, but there was I went to see him live once, and he actually like lost me a bit. He has not been invincible for me. Um, I think like he had one or two stand-ups that were actually really really good for me, and some of his other content not always like a 10 in my book.
Right. Um, so I
He's
have
actually he brings a lot of like depressing content out, and sometimes it's like really really it's so depressing it's not even funny.
really.
Yeah, and that maybe that was just live. But yeah, he was like almost unlikable at some points.
I never felt that in any of his bits I've seen online, but I never
Yeah,
been in person.
yeah,
I think my favorite bit was just his bit on like people in airplanes.
yeah. That it's funny. Airplanes are like the hottest topic. Like I feel like every great comic has a great airplane bit. I'm serious. Like all of my favorite comics have done airplane bits.
That's funny. Um, I have to backtrack to statistics because I find this fascinating. What is what is the other pillars that you have?
Um, I have like So I probably have I don't know something like 8 core pillars. It has something to go along like I don't know, family, my girlfriend, social. So those are like the 3 social things I can think of: family, girlfriend, social. Social being like friends, stuff like that. And then work, health, financial, hobbies, and contributing like to society.
Right.
And so those are like that took a long time to like figure out what things I find is a priority to my happiness. So it took a few iterations. I think I ended up adding a few things and subtracting a few things.
To
Some people may be like, well, why is work and financial separated? Well, I do make money at work, but I concentrate on work first, and usually money comes with doing good work. And then financially speaking, like there's a ton of other stuff outside of work that have to do with finances, like my spending or gambling, stuff like that. So definitely 2 different buckets for me.
right. Fuck. What was I gonna say? Fuck. Damn it. All right. I'll just ask this other question because I forgot.
Okay.
How do you like limit your spending in any way? Are you like giving yourself a daily or? Oh no. Here was the other question because I. Do you find you can hit all of these pillars and be satisfied in all areas in a week? Or does it seem like there's always one area that kind of falls short?
It's a really good question. So I've never, I'd call it green lighted all of those pillars. And beneath the pillars, I have like, I don't know. So there's like 8 pillars, and I have like 24 metrics that I measure. And so of the 24, I've never even come close to green lighting everything, which I'd say, let's say my rating system's 0 to 5. Getting 4s and above everywhere never happened, not even close. Do I think it's possible? Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Depending on what your bucket is, and I'm just speaking for myself, I should be able to hit every single pillar in a week, and I've never even come close. And you'd think it'd be easy, but it's tracking.
I think it's really hard, and I find in my life it leads to a lot of anxiety because I want to I have all these. I mean, I don't use the word pillars, but it's a good word, but so I'll use it. I have all these pillars I want to hit in a day, and when I'm working, I'm worried about I'm not doing this other thing that's important. Or when I'm doing, spending time with family, I'm worried about work. Or when the day comes to an end, I'm not ever fulfilled or satisfied because I know there's these pillars I didn't hit.
Totally understand that, and that's partially why I started doing this, because it's an iterative process, right? First thing you need to do is figure out what's important to you. Then you need to figure out a way to assess, are you doing what's necessary to achieve success and what's important to you? And then after you've identified and assessed, then you can look at it, and especially if you assess it a number of times, get yourself a sample size of, I don't know, like a year's worth of weekly assessments. And on top of that, you can, assess your overall happiness along with each one of those weeks or something. You could then start running some really mathematical stuff on, what correlates with happiness or what's driving it. Like, look for patterns and what's working, and then you can start to change based on your assessments. Like,
So I think an interesting thing is, do you have like a rolling 4-week type of average? Because I imagine in a week you don't hit all 8 pillars, but maybe in there's this rolling 4-week period where you're actually pretty satisfied with how you did for the month. You know what I mean? No, lost connection. Hold on.
Mostly information.
Repeat that because we got broken up. Start from
I have an all-time average so that I can understand kind of where my baseline is.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also have like the week average of all 24 components, all my KPIs. But I don't have any rolling, and I probably will end up needing to do that for multiple reasons. One, do I measure things the same every week? Like, if I'm measuring something now, a year from now, will I hold myself to the same standards? That throws some wrenches into things. But I hit I'm able to assess myself on all 24 items every week. And some of them, let's say, I'll give you an example. One of them is call my friends. Maybe I didn't call anyone this week. But I all of the items are totally achievable in a single week. And the question is, what should your goal be, right? And right now I don't have specific number goals on how many people I should call, how many times I should call them, and so on. That's where it gets a little bit kind of qualitative. That's why this is an iterative process for me, because I'm gonna find how at the end of the week whether I felt like I did a good job or not. And once I start feeling like I did a good job, I'll be able to tell that week, like, oh, I reached out to 2 people this week, that felt good, blah blah blah.
Do you give the week an overall number?
No, it's the number. Well, there's an unweighted average of all the items that I consider important. And then there's a qualitative write-up on how I'm feeling about the week. So that could definitely be interpreted into a number, but it's not.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how much how much skill with spreadsheets does this take?
Um,
It seems like quite a bit, because I am. I think I know
yeah,
like equal sum.
yeah,
That's the extent of my spreadsheet knowledge, and I think a lot of
no,
people listening to this might not even know that. So
yeah, no, you're probably right. Like, I take a lot of that for granted because I've lived in the spreadsheet world for like over a decade. It's like breathing. But no, I mean, like, you don't have to. It doesn't have to be overly scientific on this stuff. I mean, heck, you could do it in a journal almost. It's a lot easier to analyze your life in an analytical tool like Excel. But you could technically, you just need a way to like document it someplace. And I think it's the first step that most people don't take, right? And this gets back to what we were talking about at the beginning. If you don't put things down on paper, if you don't grade yourself on in gradable ways, you're guaranteed to manipulate history and the way it went down in your head. You're going to remember certain things and you're going to forget others. And I don't know, most people manipulate things in their favor. There are other people who manipulate things against themselves. But the only way to truly do it is put it down and, account, having an audit trail of how you performed in certain things. And then
do you know
that,
those games at the arcade where it's like, they're you're like shooting with a gun and there's like these six things falling down. If it gets to the bottom, you lose. One of them gets to the
yeah,
bottom, you lose.
yeah,
That's how I feel like with life. So I'll like focus on like one or two areas or something, and then like don't notice the other one until it like gets all the way close to the bottom and things are just like really bad. And then I just like run all the way over there.
totally. And that's what this is totally about too, because when I didn't keep records of what I did and on those six those six pillars reaching the ground, they'd smash into the ground and I have no idea. And it'd be like 8 months later, and a family member would be like, you know, what's the deal? Did you notice I haven't talked to you in half a year or something like that? Like, I reached out to you and you never reached back, and you never reach out to me. And I'd be like, oh my god, I totally didn't even realize that.
Right.
So you start putting it on paper, and it's no longer a mystery. When something's getting close to a breaking point, whether something's going to game over you and a part of your life, and you see like a lot of red, or however you track things, negative marks in a row, and you go, hey, I better prioritize this week. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to schedule something on Monday to make a call to family member X, or to get to the gym because I haven't been to the gym in 3 weeks. And you know it's so much easier when you have a checklist of things and you see that you've struck out or avoided something for a few weeks. It's like, hey, I just better start with something.
Right. So
Better than nothing.
I I feel like the problem I have is with work. I never feel like it's enough, but I don't even put that many hours. But it just I never feel like it's enough, so I never have the ability to just let go and do something else. And I use the word never, but whenever I am satisfied with work, like everything else in life clicks. Like I just have really good time and can let go. But when I'm not, which is my default setting, everything is just like slightly less enjoyable. Like I can't do something without worrying about what I'm missing out on work. And I don't know if that's something you experience, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I assume I'm making some illogical error and looking at it
Uh,
incorrectly, but I'm not sure exactly what it is.
I think most people who would hear that statement would totally relate to it. I think, uh, and I'm not everyone. I don't know everyone, but I know a lot of people who heard that statement would totally agree with that. Works like a for a lot of people is a really, really important part of your life. You spend more time working than you do with any individual friend, or you know,
Right.
you spend more time with people who work than anyone else. So, a lot of people who have to work really hard. So when work's going well, it's like the center of your life's going all right, and typically like money's related to that. You're not going to get fired. Maybe you get raises or bonuses, and just like a good place to start. If work's important to you and it's not going well, man, that can like have ripple effects through the rest of your life. When work doesn't go well for me, whew, I just like you're saying, I tend to spend more time, if not doing it, thinking about it, and that instantly starts eating into all the other things that I hold important and need to take care of.
Right.
And so if things are going well at work, even if I'm working more, maybe I'm energized and I'm not thinking about it, not worrying about it when I've left, and I can concentrate on other things. So, there's probably something to be said about making sure work's going well, as a necessity to making sure other things go well.
I think my mindset just doesn't allow that. Like it's so hard for me to be happy with a day.
Yeah. That's not good. I would say like, and that's dangerous when if you're never satisfied with work and you spend up more time doing it. Like you should set limits, especially with jobs that aren't, start time, end time. Like they're more open ended. Like if you own your own business or whatever, and you could literally spend every waking moment working. Like you should set limits. And that's the whole point about getting all your priorities down on a list and figuring out, hey, what does good look like? And if you're unsatisfied with a bunch of zeros everywhere because you need to work so hard to get an A or a 5, however you rate your work life, like it's taking up too much space in your life, and you'd have to set limits on how much you can work, and then understand you have to set realistic expectations on what you hope to achieve. Like work hard for 10 hours a day at work because I have other things to get to, and then you got to cut it off there. And,
So
and
I think the problem is there isn't this correlation between effort and outcome. One,
I,
because
I agree with that.
I think with other people's jobs it's more so. But
Yeah.
one, I play poker. Two, I fucking blog, which is just like, I mean, I think maybe even less correlative, you know.
Yeah.
Then I do podcasting, which is also that. And then I do like the free problem solving coaching, which is I don't get to do enough of, but I find really fulfilling. And so yeah, it's I don't even know exactly what my end goal is. I don't know exactly what I want, and there's no metric of to really judge how far I got in a day or how much closer I got, especially when I don't even know where I want to go. You know.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds really frustrating. We have that in consulting, it's totally relatable, where I think one of our officers once told one of my coworkers, hey, at the end of a project, you don't get to hand in how many hours you work to the client. You have to hand them a product.
Right.
You have to hand them. They don't care what it took to make what you're making. They only care about what you made. What you made. Whether it took half the time and you did a great job, or if it took double the time and you did a crappy job. But what you're getting at is, sometimes, for you, you're the one who has to judge how well you did. You don't have someone telling you.
Right. Yeah. I guess I need to actually think about what I want or something. That's a difficult question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I all I know is I just really enjoy podcasting and the problem solving coaching more than anything. And I just want to
Yeah.
be able to do that as much as possible.
Yeah. I think podcasting is pretty cool. It's almost like I feel like you do like a community service by putting yourself out there, because just like I was talking about earlier, about like putting yourself out there and talking to people. With podcasting, it's almost like you're risking something and not benefiting a ton.
Right. That's why I don't do it more.
You're risking sounding stupid, and people who listen to your podcast probably know who you are.
Yeah.
And so it will, people will then, and people get into how you think, which is it's a vulnerable thing to do, right?
Yeah. About 15 minutes before we started, I was having a bit of anxiety, worrying about what I was going to say. And that happens all the time in podcasts, and it's why I don't do it more often, even though I enjoy it about as much as anything I do.
That's cool.
It is also a cool hack, because if I just, sent anyone, or anyone sent me a message, just be like, hey, you want to get on the phone and talk for an hour and a half or 2 hours? Be like, no.
Yeah.
But it's like, you want to come on the podcast? And it's like, yeah. And you get both people are giving their complete attention, and it's just a much better conversation,
Yeah, totally.
So, get a podcast, Rory.
Get a podcast? No, this is my first one ever, and it's the second time I think I've ever put myself in a place where like multiple people could listen to me speak about unscripted things and potentially sound really dumb. I did like a I did a panel. I was on a panel at my college last year. And I was really worried about that, because I was like, man, am I really smart enough to talk about this stuff to these kids in college? Much like this podcast. I'm like, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. I go kind of shooting from the hip.
Right. Well, this podcast is just going to end up being like 15 minutes. You're just going to final cut everything. Like, take that out.
Yeah. But no, it's...
You're doing a good job. It's a good podcast. I'm having a good time.
I'm having a good time as well.
Right. So, League of Legends. You still grinding?
No, I stopped playing completely.
I stopped too. All right.
Yeah. I picked up Hearthstone though.
The what?
Hearthstone.
Oh, okay. Is that good?
I'm not sure. There's something left to be desired, but I haven't stopped playing yet. Okay. I don't know how I feel about it right now. So I just started climbing the ladder.
What I don't like is I heard you kind of have to buy shit to be able to be competitive and spend money.
Well, it's either that or devote an insane amount of time to it.
Right.
And the latter is a really bad idea, I can tell you from experience. Spending money, probably spending a lot of money is dumb, but a little bit of money wouldn't be dumb if you truly enjoyed it. And there was I don't know why you'd have to go play a game like that when you could play League of Legends or play chess, for instance, right?
Right.
Chess is very similar, where it's the dynamics of the game very, very similar.
My buddy Colin, who you've met at Jillian's, and his roommate, we get together pretty often and play Dominion. You should come sometime. Yeah. It's a really fun game.
But you guys already have a leg up on me.
That's correct. You could try and trash talk your way to the top.
Is that a potential strategy?
Not really. I don't think so.
No.
No.
Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to try it. Other than I'd get pissed off if I lost, just briefly, and then I wouldn't try it again.
You would certainly lose really often at the start.
That kind of makes me want to win very often right at the beginning, just to prove you wrong.
There's a bit of luck, so you could win, but we've put in a lot of hours.
Yeah.
So I think you'd lose.
You're most likely right, and even if you said you have a good chance at winning, I would still think I'd most likely lose. Truly, but that doesn't change the fact that I'd like to just go win and just have some crazy talent.
I kind of like losing though. it's kind of interesting because I think I don't have any great natural ability or anything.
Yeah.
It's just that I kind of like to lose and seek out people who are going to beat me. So when I do jujitsu now, it's like I just seek out the guys who are going to kick my ass and roll a bit too hard with me
Yeah.
because I know that's the way I'm going to grow the most.
Yeah.
And
Well, no, that is like your superhuman ability. You're a self learner, right? By necessity.
yeah, I,
So that's like your superpower.
yeah, it definitely helps with a lot of things. So even with chess, I think I went, you know, not doing much studying, which I'm not using that as a brag, but just playing better players and just copying their shit. I learned a ton, you
Mm.
know. I didn't practice openings. I would do my open and I'd keep like the standard open all the time and just watch how good players exploited it, then learned the counters to it, and just kept adjusting from there. And now my open game's really solid. You know.
Yeah.
The problem I had with poker is that I would take this mindset to poker and I'd play the highest stakes versus the toughest players, and I often went on six-figure downswings doing this.
Yeah. But that's like one of the biggest mistakes that all professional players make, right? Like as soon as people find any sort of success, they push to the next level and often like give back everything they've achieved plus more,
Yeah,
just in order to try to push themselves a little further or something like that.
yeah, especially I think tournament players, because I think a lot of people who play tournaments are kind of in it for the glory of winning and
They
being the
have to be.
best.
They have to be because there's no money there.
Right.
Unfortunately it's getting like more and more publicly known like how difficult it is to actually make money playing the game in tournaments,
Especially live tournaments.
especially live tournaments. I think you hit them nail on the head. Like if you're playing those, you should be playing for the glory. And if like I think about like the high roller tournaments and stuff, like with all these like stud names, and I'm like, these guys can't possibly think they have like an expected return in these tournaments.
I mean, some of them do, for sure, but a lot of them are,
No,
the majority of them are losers, I would
the-
imagine.
well, they have to be.
Right. Yeah.
But on top of that, I am not positive. I think I could agree that some of them are, but I can't prove it, and I can't prove it to myself. We don't know who real winners are. We don't have a big enough sample size. Like you would,
In high rollers, sure. Yeah.
yeah,
But I mean, I could say pretty confidently that, Fedor Holtz is one of the best players in the world and
uh,
a winning poker player.
yeah. I don't know. I would first instinct is to agree. The kid like crushed it and seems to always be making good moves and stuff like that. But I don't know. I feel like to run like a mono, like to build like a really intense poker model with like 100,000 players in a database and put them all in a bunch of tournaments ranging from 100 to 1,000 people and run like a Monte Carlo on like you know 10,000 tournaments and look at the distribution on winners and losers and see how many people run like God. Let's say there's 10,000 tournaments, 100,000 people, and I don't know. Uh, maybe that's supposed to represent I don't know like 5 years, and some person like just absolutely crushes it. And the way you build this model is, with uh, you'd have to be really sophisticated, where it's like the probability you'd have to like run like I guess like a tournament would have like 10 probability instances where you could run like 70-30s or something like that and find out like what types of players do well in the long run versus good players. I don't know. I just started thinking about that recently. That would be really fun to make a really, really complicated like Monte Carlo model.
Right. I think so. I guess you're talking about, if I'm understanding you, that there's just always going to be huge winners, basically.
There's going to be some survivorship. There's going to be people that look like gods that aren't gods. It's guaranteed to happen. It's happening. You could see it happen. Like I guess someone who studies really hard would be much more able to identify those people that exist today.
So you mean, yeah. So I was going to say, like, a lot of way you can interpret someone's skills just by hearing them talk about the game or watching them play. Yeah.
And you can never fully understand someone. You can get like really, really close, I'm sure. Like you could hear, let's say I had like put on a huge facade and claimed I was a very, very good poker player. And then I was sitting down with you and had my big ego on my sleeve and said bragged about a bunch of, caches or whatever and acted like I knew everything. And then you and I were playing or talking and you quickly identified something that wasn't up for opinion. It was like factually wrong. Like I was saying things that were just incorrect. Mm-hmm. You could then identify that I have some holes in my game, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And maybe I'm no Fedor Holtz because Fedor would never make that mistake. So there are ways to identify people who are like factually wrong about things.
Well, what's interesting is that I've coached some people for hundreds of hours, and I still don't feel like I fully understand their game.
Yeah.
And there's so much into the game other than your ability to talk about it. Like, I can talk about the game, like, really fucking good. If talking about the game would, like, determine your ROI, like, I would just destroy, just all the hours I put in. But I fucking lose a lot and have really bad sessions because, like, I'll grind chess and poker at the same time. Or I'll make a mistake in the first hour of the session and just completely implode mentally.
Or maybe game selection, right?
Or I'll game select and play all the toughest tournaments and none of the middling ones because I'm too cool for that, and just go on 6-figure downswings.
I don't understand how, like, even for you, I don't understand how you don't put more time into figuring out the appropriate game selection.
When I was younger, I just always wanted to be the best. So like, fuck.
But even now, like, couldn't you like have, like, I don't know how much time you spend doing what now, but I would spend a lot of my time figuring out what I wanted to participate in.
Yeah, my game selection is a lot better, and there's definitely tournaments I could be playing that I do not play because it just doesn't make sense given my skill edge and bankroll management. That I would play, if it was 3-4 years ago, that I'd just snap enter into them.
And how about waiting like some MTTs versus, why not find some of the underground games, cash games, like, because that there are people there with very, very limited skill.
I have a very bad ability to do things just for the sake of money, and I don't find playing live cash games at all interesting in any way. So it would just be a pure money grab.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you have the luxury to do something that may be less profitable but more fulfilling, definitely agree with that.
The problem is, even when I don't have that luxury financially, I still choose that option.
Yeah.
It's only when things get really desperate, and then I don't even have enough money to play those cash games, then
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I can play them now. But fuck, I have 5K, so I'm gonna play 2.5.
Yeah, just seems like those cash games, man. If I was ever like put between a rock and a hard place, I had no job, no income, and I had like a little bit of money, I would go start off, at a 1-2 someplace around
Yeah.
town and just absolutely slaughter.
I think if I was to tell someone to get into poker and they just wanted to make money, I would say play 2.5, 5-10 cash games. Find good
That
2.5,
that
find good 5.
that should be the second thing that you tell them.
What's the first thing?
Don't play poker.
2.5 and 5-10. I mean,
For real.
why?
If you advise anyone to play poker for a living, ooh,
Why not?
I,
What's wrong with the game?
a lot of things wrong with the game, man. It's very unfulfilling lifestyle. It's not guaranteed. There are too many mistakes to be made, and you hang around with a lot of people who can bring you down with them in different ways, shapes, and forms.
That is a very good point if you're playing live cash games, especially. And I think I've told you this. Like I can tell which young guys play online versus which guys play live just based on how withered they look.
Yeah.
Whoever spends a lot of time grinding cash at a casino, they just look
Oh,
withered.
oh, they don't have to say anything. I can feel how they're withering, like leaking on over to me. Oh, God. I'm a little bit mean sometimes to them too. I'll interrogate them at the table, like, how do you do this? I'll be like, I got here 6 hours ago and I want to kill myself. You've been here for 473 straight days.
Right.
Oh my God.
With that being said, poker has been really educational for me. So I dropped out of school when I was 14. I had no logical ability or no logical bent. I like any superstition, I believed in it. Like I'd walk around like trying to avoid cracks and like jump over them. Like if I found a dime on tails, I would do like a fist pump. Apparently that was good luck too. You know, if I broke a mirror, that was a big deal. And poker, if learned the proper way, cultivates your ability to learn logic, cultivates your ability to use mathematics in a functional way.
Totally, you become a problem solver with numbers to back up what you're doing. It's
Yeah.
got a lot of really good aspects to the game.
Yeah, if I didn't have poker, I wouldn't have had that, I wouldn't have been able to cultivate all these things. Maybe I'd read about them in a book, but I'd have no way to apply them hundreds of thousands of times. You know.
Yeah,
But I guess that could be said for any skill, really. Like almost any skill done the right way teaches you a ton about life, I would assume.
yeah. There's just so few people who make that decision. So few percentage wise that actually ends up being like a right off into the sunset type story. And I'm not talking about getting rich. I'm just talking about like being semi-successful and being happy.
Right.
There's very, very few stories. Like, uh, I know a few people, so I know it does happen.
I think skill mastery builds character if done right, but I don't know how do you do it correctly.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like you disagree.
No, I'm just chewing on it a little bit.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I'm going to play the 400 on the second, I think, at Foxwoods.
Oh, is that a New Year's thing? It's like
Um,
their New Year's special What's the guarantee on that?
50K, I think. It's a 400 rebuy one-day tournament.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. I have too much makeup to make that worthwhile.
Yeah.
So I have some questions that I usually end.
Plus, you don't want to play that. I'm going to be at top of my game.
Huh?
I'm going to be at the top. I'm going to be at the top of my game. I'm going to be slaying fools. You don't want to be put at my table.
It would be fun to watch. I think if I was to watch anyone play poker, it would be you.
I take that as a great compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, watching good players isn't that fun. I don't want to do that. You should do.
Throw some backhanded compliments in there.
I mean, great players. Sorry, great players. Anyways, so I ended with some questions. What books have you read that most impacted your life?
Ooh, I don't have the names to those. I do have them somewhere around here. But some trading books. When I was interviewing for a prop trading trading job in New York, I had to read some trading books, and there was this one book that talked about all kinds of biases. And that book had a huge impact in my life, and specifically just that there are different types of biases. And then, one that really stuck out was relative bias. I got obsessed with the relative bias. And I tried to do a Google search and find some books on relative bias. I didn't find a lot of good stuff out there. But, so I think there are some cool psychology books out there. And now there are some more, because this happened like 10 years ago. Now there are more books that I started reading. And I haven't read The Hidden Brain yet, but I think I told you about that. The Hidden Brain is a cool one. The Signal and the Noise. A lot of these books didn't blow my mind. They were like new information. It just made me think about them more and put them into context and refresh them in my mind.
Right. So relativity bias is like, if you're playing poker and you had 10,000 chips, but you have 10,000 chips, but earlier you had 20,000, so now you're upset.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were in another situation where you had 5,000 earlier and now you have 10,000, you're ecstatic.
Yeah, that's one really good example. Yeah.
Right. So that's basically it. I don't know how I would categorize that.
It's partly about poker is a very emotional. Well, people are very emotional, and poker should not be very emotional. Right. And relative bias is just a really, really great example of, and you can see this from the best players in the world, and they'll admit to it. A lot of them will, who are aware of it, that no one's perfect, and we are emotional creatures playing logical, strategic games, and it's in your best interest to have great control over your emotions and be aware of things that you can't control.
All right. So here's a weird question, and I really like asking it. So the question is, what do you love? And the less obvious, the better, and it could be multiple things. And it could be really small, too. It could be super tiny.
What do I love? Yeah, that's weird. That's a deep question. Yeah. No. I love my family.
Okay, it's a big, obvious one.
Yeah, well, it has to come first.
Yep.
Otherwise, people would lose respect for me if they had any to begin with.
Yep.
Secondly, I love protecting or helping people who can't protect themselves.
Right. Yeah, I remember your stories from high school. Those are pretty inspiring and cool.
Yeah, and that's I think that's really rewarding. Really make a difference for someone. So I love that. What else do I love? And I love health, I guess. I don't need health, but I do love being healthy.
Sweet. Um, Other questions. Do you have a morning routine?
I'm working on that, but no.
Right. No morning routine. What's typical breakfast? This is a weird question. I'm just into breakfast for some reason.
Depends if I'm dropping weight or not. So if I am in weight dropping mode, I have either a fiber bar, hard boiled egg, only one of these things. A fiber bar, hard boiled eggs, oatmeal, and that's it, I think, really.
Cool.
Sometimes I don't even eat breakfast, and I'll alternate, and I always alternate between like seltzers and coffees.
Awesome.
But then if I'm not on diet, I'll have, you know, ham, egg, and cheese on a English muffin.
Have you won the weight loss bet? Is that over?
Well, me and my partner both lost.
You both lost.
I've been sick 3 times in the last 2 months. And the first sickness was 10 days. And this last sickness, I've been sick for 12 or 13 days.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that really impeded my ability to drop poundage.
For sure. Excuses, man. Keep making them.
I'm not making them. I'm just highlighting them.
Keep highlighting. Well, it was really fun having you on. It was really cool. Thanks for coming on. Where can people find you? Do you care if people find you? You want your Twitter, Facebook out there, or anything like that?
I'm not that hard to find. No, I don't. Yeah, no, it's fine. Put my information out there.
Right. So Rory Anderson on Facebook and
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
yeah.
And I don't think you have a Twitter, do you?
I do.
What's your handle?
I don't know. Let me check. It is at smell that peppa.
How do you spell that? Is it DAT or T?
No. I spell it properly, except for Peppa. Peppa is Peppah.
Solid. All right.
Yeah, it's much like my Instagram. Can you smell that Peppa? It comes from an SNL skit.
All right. All right, dude. Well, thanks for coming on. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Peace.